Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Elite Church of Christ, and I am a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Coast Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 41. We are covering Intermarifica 8 to 10 on moderation in media, right? So we don't just use whatever media we want, but we actually have some moderation in it. And this is continuing chapter 1 on the teaching of the church, the more general chapter of the two chapters of this document. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. So both yesterday and today, we're talking about the ethics in media. Yesterday, we talked about news media, objectivity of morality, and portrayals of evil. Today, we're talking about public opinion, choosing media well, and moderation in consumption. Each one of those is one paragraph. So we get into paragraph 8, our first paragraph today on public opinion. Let's read it. Since public opinion exercises the greatest power and authority today in every sphere of life, both private and public, every member of society must fulfill the demands of justice and charity in this area. As a result, all must strive through these media as well to form and spread sound public opinion. So that's it, right? So what is public opinion, right? I know even in my own life, I'm not that old, I've seen how much like the polls are way more in the news today. Like you look at, say something political and there's like a poll every day, a new poll. Whereas when I was a kid, it was much rarer. We'd have a poll here and there. You'd have maybe a few polls during the election. And this is not necessarily bad, but it's also, how do we look at it? How do we think about it, right? Like even today, like you have things like sites that just aggregate other polls. Like they're already, and those are the things that people look at for the polls. Now, they don't even look at individual polls, especially for big things like who's going to be the president or who's going to win Congress or things like that in the U.S. And so the question is, like, how do we deal with this? How do we look at this, right? Because people like to be part of the majority. That's just the reality. And so these kind of things, especially if you use them deceptively, can unduly sway public opinion. That can be a problem. And we need to be aware of this public opinion. We swim with the truth. We go with the truth. We don't just flow with the current, right? We don't just follow the current. No, we go forward. And there is this justice and charity in how we pursue it, how we portray it, right? So that is the importance of public opinion and public opinion polling and how we do it. So let's move on to paragraph 9 on choosing media ethically. Let's read it. All who, of their own free choice, make use of these media of communication as readers, viewers, or listeners have special obligation. For a proper choice demands that they fully favor those presentations that are outstanding for their moral goodness, their knowledge, and their artistic or technical merit. They ought, however, to avoid those that may cause an occasion of spiritual harm to themselves, or that can lead others into danger through base example, or that hinder desirable presentation and promote those that are evil. To patronize such presentations, in most instances, would merely reward those who use media only for profit. In order that those who make use of the media may fulfill the moral code, they ought not to neglect to inform themselves in time about judgments passed by authorities competent in these matters. They ought also to follow such judgments according to the norms of an upright conscience, so that they may more easily resist improper inducements and rather encourage those that are desirable. Let them take care to guide and instruct their consciences with suitable aids. Pretty straightforward number, right? Talking about the need for us to make choices as media. We don't just watch the most disgusting media, the most kind of like morally perverse media, and we make those choices, right? And we have all those different things. That's the basic gist of it. But let's go into a few points I wrote down here. We have obligations, right? We need to choose ethically what we consume. We can't just choose it. It says just for money, people looking just for money for profit. But I think also some people in the media are looking specifically to corrupt morals, to push a corrupt morality. And I think that's even worse in a way. Favor those standing for morals, truth, and true beauty. I hope this podcast can be that. I know my voice is not the most beautiful, but morals and truth for sure. And it's not just religious content, right? I know I watch a decent number of documentary type stuff, like on YouTube elsewhere, where it's talking about, all about this animal that I'm interested in, or all about some kind of history or things like that. And those are interesting. Those are good for Christians to do. And they're not religious. It's not religious that how zebras work, right? It doesn't really affect religion, but it is helpful for that. And things like that. I mean, other people watch other shows. I'm sure there's other shows. I know some of the priests in the Legion in North America, like Blue Bloods, the kind of police show. I think it has pretty good morals, but I'm not giving an endorsement because that's not my expertise. And we can be overly negative as well. We don't just need to be everything's bad, everything's evil. No, it's not that way. But avoid those leading to sin, right? We don't want to increase the prophecies companies. And, we don't need to be radical Puritans here, but there are some that go too far, right? So I think like the Game of Thrones is an example in that sense, right? Those are the kind of things that are important, that it goes well beyond it from the descriptions I've heard. I've never watched it. I've never watched any of it, but just the description I've heard of some of the scenes is inappropriate. And then there was talked about the guides, right? So there's a number of different guides. I remember when I was a teenager in the 90s, we used to get plugged in from Focus on the Family, which is a Protestant group, but, Protestant evangelicals and us, 95% plus of the ethical concerns, we have the same ones, right? And there's a lot still today. Sister Hosea, who we interviewed, and Deacon Stephen Gray Dinas review movies. And then another site that's sometimes helpful is called Common Sense Media. It's mainly designed for parents, but I use it sometimes for inappropriate stuff, like if for my own, for checking out a movie for my religious community or things like that. And then respect church authorities if they direct things about media, right? The church rarely rules on it now. It used to do it much more, but we need to respect the church when it does, right? So let's go on to paragraph 10, our last one today, which is on moderation in media consumption and the idea of how parents help children as well. So let's read it. Those who make use of the media of communications, especially the young, should take steps to accustom themselves to moderation and self-control in their regard. They should, moreover, endeavor to deepen their understanding of what they see, hear, and read. They should discuss these matters with their teachers and experts and learn to pass sound judgments on them. Parents should remember that they have the most serious duty to guard carefully lest shows, publications, and other things of that sort, which may be morally harmful, enter their homes or affect their children under other circumstances. So this is the idea, right? So we need to have that idea of a media fast. Best example, I'm often on social media, things like that, and those type of things are not perfect. I'll have to check that. I don't know if you just heard that. I just, my computer just made a big boom sound because I got a text saying I have an appointment tomorrow, reminder appointment. Anyways, media fasts are good. And we need to take a step back, make sure we're not drawn in too much. We need to understand it so we can moderate, right? Not all of it's good. A lot of times people make social media posts in middle school, high school that they regret. There's certain pro athletes where people bring up their dumb tweets from high school or middle school. And it's like, yeah, like, okay, there's just a middle school at that point. You get it, but still the same thing. And even so now it's like all the AI garbage that's on there and all the bots and other kind of things, pushing all kinds of misinformation all different directions. And I think there's a role for parents and educators here, talking about teachers and parents. I think that this is important, especially parents. I think today there's a big concern with parents of like what age are going to give their kids a cell phone. I think that that's a big concern. You don't want to give kids a cell phone way too early. And even kids, a lot of times when they're in their 20s, will be like, oh, this is too early. And things, my parents get it too early. I asked, but in hindsight, they should have held off for another few years, right? And things like that. I'm not going to tell you exactly what age, but I would definitely say that a lot of kids get it too early. And then also how you choose shows. And parents have different methods of doing this. I want to tell you a little story about how my mom did it. I'm not saying every parent has to do this, but it was quite effective for me. So my mom's rule was, if I wanted to watch any news show that she thought might not be the best, I had to watch the first episode with her. And I had a pretty good relationship with my parents, so I wasn't super rebellious teenager or anything. So maybe this might not work if you're a rebellious teenager, but the one I remember most was when I was in 8th or 9th grade, I forget exactly, Beavis and Butthead on MTV was like the coolest show, and everybody in school was talking about how cool the show was. And I didn't get how bad the show was from that. And so I watched an episode of Beavis and Butthead with my mom. And my mom did not even have to say afterwards, "You're not watching the show again." I already knew just looking at her face just looking at her and talking and thinking with her, no, this is not the kind of show I should be watching. And so that really, taught me how to do it, right? And we would discuss the shows if it was questionable. I think we watched South Park and she's like, well, it's not really the best. And, whereas Beavis and Butthead was like clearly obvious. No. Anyways, let's close up. Thank you for listening to Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarQuest produce and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with Intermarifica, paragraphs 11 and 12 on duties of media and government. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which will provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan.
Amen.